Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industries, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. And with some unfortunate news, as Germany has unveiled their revised plan to legalize cannabis, and it's an unfortunately very scaled back and watered down plan, so definitely changes the mood towards what Germany could have been, unfortunately fucking it up like New York has, but let's dive into it. So German officials unveil revised plan to legalize cannabis. It is fresh off the press. German Health Minister Karl Lauterbach and Federal Minister of Food and Agriculture Cem Özdemir released the updated legalization framework today, sharing details about the proposal during a press conference. And after waiting for so long, it's sad to be this disappointed. As they claim the previous cannabis policy has failed, Lauterbach said, sure, it's failed in promoting public health, and it's allowed the black market to thrive. Of course, sadly, that's what we've gotten thus far. And he says, now we have a to-go new ways, which essentially changes very little, allows the black market to continue to thrive, and puts political science above the actual science and public health, sadly. And so the new plan seeks to provide for the controlled delivery of cannabis to adults within clear limits, he said, and adding that we want to fight the black market and we want to push back drug-related crimes. How are you going to fucking do that if you don't provide at least 1,000 legal outlets for the roughly 60 million adults that might want to go and try recreational cannabis once you launch it? It makes no sense. And essentially, it's going to be government-run, so it comes to you and I can't go get it myself. Slowly but surely, the elimination of the free market concept, one pilot project at a time. It's fucking infuriating. Europe, why are you playing us like this? And so the plan represents a scaling back of legalization framework that the government had initially announced last year. While there would be limited sales components, there wouldn't be a countrywide commercial cannabis market as originally envisioned. Well, there's your problem right there. That's what you needed, that's what you didn't deliver, so nothing's going to change. Instead, the government is looking to allow adults to possess up to 25 grams of cannabis and grow up to 3 flowering plants for personal use while permitting cannabis clubs with a maximum of 500 members where growers could distribute products similar to those in Spanish and Malta. What about the amazing growers that can make money off of selling it through capitalism, and why can't we allow them to thrive too? Adults 21 and older would see purchase limit of 50 grams a month via the clubs, and sales to adults between 18 and 21 would be limited to a total of 30 grams within a month. What the fuck is with all these regulations and limitations? Are you Canada? On-site consumption would not be allowed at the clubs, though they could distribute up to 7 seeds or 5 cutting to members. Man, this just sounds like crap. And so I'm very disappointed, obviously, because I had high hopes in Tilray being able to capitalize on the commercial market of this eventually, but sadly there won't be one. So there's more here if you want to read. Otherwise, you can grab the full link, but just wanted to share some of the highlights. And I'm disappointed. You might not be. You might think it's still a great step in the right direction. What do you think? Please let me know in the comments. Well, we got this one from the Dales Report, covering one from Reuters.com, so I'll put the Reuters link. But highlighting, indeed, the German government has taken a cannabis light approach to new adult use regulations out of the gate. It's almost like they haven't learned anything and they haven't looked at any of the data. But again, they're obviously going on political science, not actual science. Among the details released this morning highlights below 25-gram recreational possession limit and commercial sales coming later, 2024. And so neither of these sources said when commercial sales are actually going to come. And so again, few actual details seem to be cemented. And it's just so shitty seeing politics get in the way, because had Germany stuck to their original plan, this would have been massive for Germany, an economic boom in itself for cannabis industries and non-cannabis industries that could help across the globe as well, and helping normalize the plant. And so will this make a dent at all when the market opens? It's 9:30 now, we're going to have to wait and see. But how are you going to allow people to possess something that they can't legally buy from any fucking outlets? Like, get your head out of your asses, German politicians. And so lastly, I wanted to share this one, a write-up from someone on Reddit. So take it with a grain of salt, but seems like they've done a bit of digging in the past few days as well and shared the good and bad of German legalization, aka, again, decriminalization, no legal outlets, so you're letting the black market proliferate. So we'll see how this political science-based test ends up going. But with that, thank you, Chris24898, for thinking out loud and sharing a bit of a summary of what you believe to be the bad of the recent news, the good of the recent news, and then some answers to questions from journalists. And so there's more here if you want to grab the link below in the description to check that out. But so with that, on to some state news. Marijuana Moment shares Connecticut cannabis sales reached record 22 million in March as adult use market matures. 3 months in, chill the fuck out, Kyle Yeager. And so March marked the 3rd month since adult use cannabis sales launched in the state, and there's been a familiar upward trend in these early months of the rollout, as medical cannabis purchases are still outpacing rec sales, which is very surprising, as we rarely see that in most states. So it seems like something in the infrastructure was designed to allow medical to thrive. Who knows? Let me know if you you know more about that. But with the more established patient market bringing in about 12.6 million and the newer industry seeing 9.6 million in cannabis commerce for the month. And so March jumping up again. This is adult use sales up to 9.5 million, med up to 12.5, med up from 11.4 last month, and adult use up from 7. And so obviously, if you open more outlets, you're going to probably sell a lot more cannabis. But with that, you can pause to read a little bit more here if you're interested. But there is another graph, total number of cannabis products sold. And we are seeing this number grow a little bit more fast than the other ones. But March 2020, we saw 234,000 products up from 168. And then 339,000 up from 316. So definitely less growth in the medical field. And a little bit more down here if you wanted to pause to read. Otherwise, you can grab the full link in the description. And so with that, just wanted to share this interesting visual that Cannasours.io put together. It was implying something from looking at the CT cannabis market trends from launch in January to the end of March 2023. And at least in February to March month-over-month percentage change, adult use did increase 36.14%, while medical saw only 9.91% increase. And so definitely seeing a bit more of a jump to adult use than medical. Total combined, though, 19.9%, but according to Cannasours.io, what he sees is that medical sales are starting to convert to adult use, which is great to see because in every market that launches for rec, we see a massive spike in rec sales as many medical jump over to rec because they know what they need to get out of dispensaries. So very interesting to see that Connecticut's been one of the few that has not followed that trend. And so just if you're interested, 2023 cannabis sales monthly, essentially the same data, but a different way to look at it from the last story. And then CT 2023 cannabis sales by week. And then, of course, blue is adult use, red is med. And so with that, last one from Cannasours.io on this topic, just because why not if it's relevant to Connecticut. But Curaleaf has 4 dispensaries operating currently in CT out of 19 total approved. And so again, you've only got 19. You can't fight the black market with just fucking 19 dispensaries. But I digress. 2 medical and 2 hybrid AU medical. Curaleaf is positioned to rake in 20% roughly of total sales at current number of licenses. Q1 CT sales totaled around 53 million. And so for what it's worth, I'm not a shareholder of Curaleaf, just sharing this because it's relevant to an MSO getting a decent market share of a new market. That obviously could sell a lot more if they open more dispensary outlets. But with that, also just sharing the data from these two are from data.ct.gov. This one was also data, health, and human services, probably something out of Connecticut as well. And so both of those links, of course, in the description if you want to grab them. So with that, just wanted to relay, though, at least a state that does not hold back, allows, the industry to be built from the ground up and sees success by allowing as many dispensaries to flourish as possible. As Missouri cannabis sales hit 126 million in March. State data shows with market expected to reach 1 billion by year's end. And so I know I already covered this in my last week's video, but just sharing it again if you missed it. Missouri couldn't be better positioned to make a real and lasting impact on a state economy. Why couldn't more states follow the Missouri playbook? It's a damn shame, but I'm sure many will once they see the continued success. And so with that sad reality out of New York, as nothing changes, more people die, sadly, and this blood is on the hands of these 2 evil monsters, Shmuck Schumer and Cory Booker. New York's disastrous rollout of legal weed is costing money and lives, and especially the longer they don't pass the Safe Banking Act, more dispensaries are targeted for armed robbery and more people lose their lives because of organized crime, knowing that they can target these dispensaries. Sums up, New York cannabis roll out nicely and essentially life under the evil Biden administration after the last few years. And so very sad. More on that story, though, if you wanted to read through it. And on top of that, Joseph Lacerti, who is vice chairman at Curaleaf, just sharing an interesting story, but again, the perspective of what is going on in New York. It's unfathomable almost at this point and continues to seemingly get worse before it's ever going to get better. But in a recent one from the New York Post, New York favors felons and snubs disabled veterans in awarding of pot licenses. You can't make that shit up. Advocates say Governor Kathy Hochul administration is discriminating against disabled military vets. Essentially, that is when you're focusing on one group over the other based on whatever preconceived notions you have by prioritizing convicted drug felons when awarding licenses. It's absolute horseshit. And are we even surprised at this point? Of course not, because that's exactly what social equity is designed to do. It gives these idiot Marxist regulators and employees of the state the right to discriminate based on what they believe is fair, based on their own critical consciousness that they've developed that we're too bigoted to understand, and then when we call them out on being racist, they cry racist against us when we're just trying to call out their blatant discrimination. I mean, you cannot make this shit up. And all social equity is designed to do is make everyone equally poor, hence why there's only 4 or 5 dispensaries legally open versus the 1,500 to 1,700 illegal ones. And so failure by design, and we just gotta laugh at the shit show that is New York because they're going to implode on themselves, and then we can build it back up with the right, American spirit. And so with that, MJ Biz Daily, some other state news. Maryland adult use cannabis sales on track for July 1 launch after lawmakers okay rules. So love to share that. I did put in the comments in my last video all the updated legislation that Maryland has agreed on, and I believe now the governor is expected to sign into law before a key Monday deadline legislation that sets regulation for adult use sales and cultivation, all that so that it does launch and has what it needs for July 1st. And so that means we should get the news from today until Friday, whether they sign it or not, if they need to sign it by Monday. Otherwise, there could be some delay, but it's good to see Maryland on pace to legalize again, another state legalizing through the ballot, which we love to see. Obviously, taking their time, not as quick as Missouri, but yeah, more on this story if you want to grab the link below. And with that, Minnesota was another state planning to legalize in 2023, and I think they've gone through 14 or 15 committee readings, almost there. What's taking so long? But Minnesota cannabis bill is within sight. That's the latest update I have as of April 12th. So not a whole lot. You can pause to read, as I think one of the senators was basically taking questions from people in the state, asking about the program. I wish I could provide you a date of when this is going to pass, but essentially the good news, and really all I can tell you out of this, is that as she meets with colleagues and others, Port says she's confident the votes are there for it to pass when they hold the vote. Not sure when that will be, but just wanted to share that. So more on this if you wanted to read the full story out of Minnesota, but that's 2 more states on pace to legalize before the end of the year, in Maryland by summertime, which will be great for them. And this one from Westward, as Colorado cannabis workforce drops nearly 30%. And so as Colorado, I think, is in their 8th year, that is a mature market, not like I believe Connecticut was referred to as a mature market 3 months in. But this is what does happen after 8 years of a market. Sadly, we will see some of the workforce fall off, and Colorado is seeing a nearly 30% drop. And so that represents nearly 10,500 cannabis jobs from 2022 to 2023. Colorado went from the 2nd to the 6th in state cannabis employment. So not like they're falling off completely, but going from number 2 to 6. Again, when you consider that it's the most mature market, then that gives more reason as to why. But yeah, not ideal to see that 28% drop. Dispensary sales have been struggling across the country. And so more on this here if you wanted to pause to read, but just highlighting the reality that while we have new markets come online and that provides more jobs and opportunity and employment, we're going to see some of the more mature markets come off. And that's why it's just so important to have some states come online and reform their laws while more other states mature with theirs. And so on to some MSO news. As we are still waiting for Curaleaf to release their Q4 earnings, I'm not exactly sure what the holdup is, but it's now April 12th. I'm sure it's coming soon, but in the near term, they've completed their acquisition of Deseret Wellness, boosting their presence in Utah as the state's largest retail operator. And while Utah is still medical only, this transaction enables Curaleaf to better serve Utah's rapidly expanding medical program, which recorded a record-breaking $118.7 million in sales last year. So very small, lots of room for growth, and no doubt Bojo wants to get in on that opportunity while it's still small. And so the cash and stock transaction, valued at approximately $20 million USD, includes 3 dispensaries located in the cities of Park City, Provo, and Payson, with a combined annualized revenue run rate of $14 million. And so things are cheap, and good to see them making what seem to be smart moves, but hopefully we'll get their Q4 sooner than later to compare with that. While Air Wellness opens 2 new retail locations in Florida, and so love to see what Air is doing in Florida. Big push for that 2024 potential ballot, but they've opened 2 new locations in Winter Haven and Palatka. So more on here if you wanted to pause to read. Obviously, Florida is very competitive. They allow a lot of dispensaries, which means you can legally supply the demand, and they have recently just surpassed 807,000 patients. And when you consider that they're still med-only, Florida is one of the few med states that are still growing month over month, although the growth is slowing a little bit, but they're bringing on new patients, and that is helping. But no doubt, with a population of 21 million, if they can get that legalization in 2024, and the 100 million plus tourists that visit Florida every year, that's going to be one of the biggest ones to pay attention to. And so with that, long-awaited news, I'm sure for some of you, but Tilray Brands reports their 3rd quarter fiscal year 2023 financial results and announces accretive acquisition of 100% of Hexo Corp. So while it is nice to see Tilray gobble up some more market share, especially buying Redditor, which Hexo paid, I think, $935 million last year to buy, as a Tilray shareholder overall, I'm not very happy with the earnings report, but not to expect anything like that, because I don't believe cannabis trades on fundamentals or technicals or anything at this point in time. I want to keep my Tilray shares because I want that exposure on the NASDAQ, because I think I will still get a return on investment if there's any momentum from the Germany news or from any actual change in the U.S. legislation going forward that we're waiting on. But all this to highlight is that I don't believe technicals or fundamentals matter anymore. We need legislation, or I don't know what happens. And so just sharing my thoughts. What do you think at this point? Let me know in the comments. And again, when not if with SAFE would be great. I can wait, but it's getting frustrating, and seeing Germany sort of fail to live up to what it would have been is very, very disappointing. And so highlights here, though, if you wanted to pause to read. Again, don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'll let you pause to read if you're interested, because again, I don't like going through financials. It's not my strong suit. But main thing to highlight, recorded a non-cash 1.1 billion write-off resulting from higher interest rates and a decline in market cap. You could say goodwill and impairment, but essentially where we're seeing the MSOs write off 200 million to 300 to 400 to 500 million, we're seeing again an LP write off 1.1 billion. Now, Tilray or Aphria had never been as bad as Canopy or Aurora, but now they're entering into that territory. This non-cash net asset reduction has no impact on the company's compliance with debt covenants, its cash flow, or available liquidity. And so at least to compensate for this, they did get a steal in their acquisition with Hexo. So a bit more here if you wanted to pause to read the management commentary. You can pause to read for the operating highlights, and then the last bit you can pause to read here as well. And while I do think the future would have been much brighter had Germany not completely shot themselves in the foot and scaled back their plan, because obviously Tilray could have capitalized on some of that success, it is at least nice to see Tilray expanding some of their medical into other European countries and broadening distribution, as Czech Republic is another one of the EU countries trying a pilot program. But of course, the amount of cannabis is literally peanuts that get sent over in this. Otherwise, highlighting that Tilray is in the process of just becoming a big alcohol company that specializes or has a little bit of an offshoot in cannabis. But so with that, on to the news, as Tilray strikes US $29 million deal to buy Hexo in latest pot M&A move. And this is again just hilarious to think last year Hexo paid $935 million for Redditor. The founders of Hexo wrote a book on the $1 billion cannabis startup or something like that. Yeah, sorry that didn't work out for you guys, but Tilray will acquire Hexo by paying US $56 million in an all-stock deal to acquire the remaining outstanding shares it doesn't own after it will exercise the US $173 million secured convertible note it acquired from Hexo's former creditor, HT Investments MA LLC, in July 2022. I can't imagine that the former Redditor owners who got shares of Hexo that are now going to convert, they probably are not very happy about this, but seems like a great deal for Tilray, I would say. And that's at least going to get their market share up to, from my understanding, I saw 13%. Yeah, down here, 13%. And so with that, don't want to spend too much time on this as all the details are right here, and I don't want to fudge it. Don't shoot the messenger, but just sharing the news that came through. Here you can pause to read, and then the rest of it you can pause to read. Otherwise, of course, you can grab the link below if you wanted to watch the video. Well, we've got this one from Weed Street 420, arguably one of the biggest bears in cannabis, sharing this interesting visual from Viridian Capital, highlighting US MSO EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, or in other words, profits after subtracting all costs, expectations last year versus now. And while they have sunk quite a bit, this is the number of millions of expected profit after all was said and done. And clearly it could have been a different story if New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut didn't prove to be run by communists that want to provide equal outcomes for most and only provide opportunity to a select few that they decide, as opposed to providing equal access to opportunity. And while that does suck, the blue bar highlights what their 2022 EBITDA estimates were on April 7th last year, so much higher than what even their 2023 EBITDA estimates for this full year are on April 7th of this year. Which is in green. And so shout out to GTI not aiming too high, but again, it just would have been, or it could have been a different story if this industry wasn't continuously discriminated against by politicians and regulators. And of course, if you remove 280E, this could be a different story tomorrow. But so many barriers that are blocking this industry, I just got to say, proud of them for continuing to perform with both hands tied behind their backs. Something's got to give at some point, you'd like to think. That's why we're holding out for some safe or incremental reform. Now, of course, you don't want to invest based on what you imagine would be the best case scenario. You want to invest based on what's actually happening. We understand that. Unfortunately, my bags are too heavy, and I have to remain hopeful that one day justice is going to be served. And so that's my spiel there. But wanted to share this other one from seekingalpha.com. So take this with a grain of salt as well. Not saying we are at the bottom of the cycle. It would be great. We don't know, but just sharing something written by Verdant Peak Research looking at MSOs. Obviously, I'm more of a fan of investing in individual MSOs that you think are going to be more successful in the long run. MSOs has been a terrible investment, especially based on the fee, but they write U.S. cannabis sector oversold and ready to light up. And so summary points here, again, I'm not advocating for this, just sharing it because it is someone else's perspective as to why they think the sector might light up. Obviously I've given you my reasons, but link is below if you wanted to read through what they have to say. And so with that last bit of stories to round off, thank you, Tom Engel, for sharing as the Congressional Progressive Caucus is urging the Biden administration to expedite its cannabis scheduling review and reinstate protections for state legal cannabis programs that were rescinded under the Trump administration. This is the Cole Memo 2.0. This would be phenomenal. And of course, it would be great if the Biden admin would keep their promise. Are we holding our breath that this is going to happen? No, but do love to see these efforts and hope that more will pick up from now until the future. And with Marijuana Moment sharing another one, another federal court ruling that bans cannabis consumers from possessing guns is unconstitutional. Love to see it because it is true, and especially anyone using cannabis should not be seen as more of a danger than someone who might have any beers or access to alcohol. As another federal court has ruled that banning people who use cannabis from possessing firearms is unconstitutional, and it said the same legal principle also applies to the sale and transfer of guns as well. Mainly because, get this, the DOJ has recently found itself in several courts attempting to defend the cannabis firearms ban. Essentially, the DOJ is actively trying to infringe upon the Second Amendment rights of Americans. Can you fucking believe that? The current administration in charge is trying to violate the Constitution and the rights of Americans. You can't make this shit up. And if we weren't living in such a clown world, they'd be held accountable, and much of the Biden administration would, you'd like to think. Much like the last administration would have, but I digress. And its arguments have faced increasing scrutiny in light of broader precedent-setting Second Amendment cases that generally make it more difficult to impose gun restrictions. But again, the double standard to think that anyone with medical cannabis is going to be more danger with a gun than to think of anyone who uses alcohol with access to a gun is just preposterous. And so, silly nonetheless. Most of us know that, but full link down here if you wanted to read more. Just love to see that. Judges standing up for the rights of Americans, as they should. So with that, France to extend their therapeutic cannabis trials for another year, which must mean that their med pilot program is pretty successful. Otherwise, why would they extend it for another year as opposed to, following the will of the people and giving the plant back? But I digress. Under the trial, which started in October 2020, patients with the following diseases can be given a prescription to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. So we love to see that. Hopefully they'll expand, the symptoms or diseases that will get access to it. But nonetheless, where we're at so far, and more on cannabis consumption in France if you wanted to pause to read. And why do we want to see this plant descheduled so badly? Well, let alone it doesn't belong in the CSA in the first place. The 33,000+ studies on PubMed are enough evidence to attest that. But wanted to share this one from High Times. CBD, rare cannabinoid, cannabidivarin, shows great promise for autism spectrum disorder. Now, keep in mind, this is a sponsored post, so it's likely it's someone trying to sell something at the bottom. That's not why I'm sharing it. I'm mainly sharing it to just relay the data that we know about some effective parts of CBD that can go a long way to being an effective medicine. And so the main areas that CBDV shows potential for are improving social ability, motor coordination, short-term memory, while decreasing irritability and repetitive movements. How counterintuitive, eh? Cannabis and short-term memory? Well, what do you know? That's what the studies find. Well, CBD is also being examined for seizures, muscular dystrophy, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And let me be an example. I've never been tested for ADHD or OCD, but as a kid, I had very OCD tendencies of turning the doorknob or checking to make sure the stove was turned off, or going to catch the bus, then running home to make sure I closed the garage, and then missing the bus. But you can clearly tell I have a lot of energy, and I can often be going at 110 miles an hour, and if I don't consciously slow myself down, I get ahead of myself and that takes over. And so cannabis has been a very effective tool. And I'm so grateful I'm Canadian. Otherwise, I wouldn't have just easy access to the choice of that versus opioids or something else. And so that's why descheduling makes just the most sense in terms of public health, giving people the option that they need that best suits them. And so in this article, they'll explain what it is if you want to learn more about it, describe studies on it, as well as CBD and autism, and then where to find safe, lab-tested. But so again, this is not an endorsement for this ad or High Times whatsoever. It's simply just reiterating with the data that's been out for a long time that we already know, CBD and cannabis do show great promise for many medical ailments, hence why we ought to deschedule. And with the continued incompetence, likely deliberately from these politicians, otherwise it'd be descheduled a long time ago, thank you, Mechanical Hound, for this tweet, because it's very timely, and the more the delays constantly go on and the will of the American people is thwarted, I genuinely believe this is true, especially when you consider medical schools don't teach much about the endocannabinoid system. And from my understanding, the endocannabinoid system is responsible for providing homeostasis, or balance within the body. And so let me know what you think in the comments, but as time goes on, I believe this to be more and more true, especially the longer we get cannabis kept in the Schedule 1 where it doesn't belong, as prohibition of cannabis has led to an endocannabinoid deficient population, which as a result has led to many serious medical conditions which are coincidentally treated with cannabis. Would you agree or disagree? I just found this very timely, very true, and just wanted to share this to end this off. But that is it for today's episode, folks. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it, subscribe below, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.